The Dore Lectures on Mental Science. By Thomas Troward. Lecture 10. The Worship of Ishi. Part 1 of 2. In Hosea, verse 2, chapter 16, we find this remarkable statement, "And it shall be at that day, saith the Lord, that thou shalt call me Ishi, and shalt no more call me Baali," and with this we may couple the statement in Isaiah verse 62. Chapter 4. Thou shalt be called Hephzibah, and thy land Beulah, for the Lord delighteth in thee, and thy land shall be married. In both these passages we find a change of name, and since a name stands for something which corresponds to it, and in truth only amounts to a succinct description, the fact indicated in these texts is a change of condition answering to the change of name. Now the change from Baali to Ishi indicates an important alteration in the relation between the divine being and the worshipper, but since the divine being cannot change, the altered relation must result from a change in the standpoint of the worshipper, and this can only come from a new mode of looking at the divine, that is, from a new order of thought regarding it. Baali means lord, and Ishi means husband, and so the change in relation is that of a female slave who is liberated and married to her former master. We could not have a more perfect analogy. Relatively to the universal spirit, the individual soul is esoterically feminine, as I have pointed out in Bible Mystery and Bible Meaning, because its function is that of the receptive and formative. This is necessarily inherent in the nature of the creative process. But the individual's development as the specializing medium of the universal spirit will depend entirely upon his own conception of his relation to it. So long as he only regards it as an arbitrary power, a sort of slave owner, he will find himself in the position of a slave driven by an inscrutable force, he knows not whither or for what purpose. He may worship such a god, but his worship is only the worship of fear and ignorance, and there is no personal interest in the matter except to escape some dreaded punishment. Such a worshipper would gladly escape from his divinity, and his worship, when analyzed, will be found to be little else than disguised hatred. This is the natural result of a worship based upon unexplained traditions instead of intelligible principles, and is the very opposite of that worship in spirit and in truth which Jesus speaks of as the true worship. But when the light begins to break in upon us, all this becomes changed. We see that a system of terrorism cannot give expression to the divine spirit, and we realize the truth of St. Paul's words, "He hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind." As the true nature of the relation between the individual mind and the universal mind becomes clearer, we find it to be one of mutual action and reaction, a perfect reciprocity which cannot be better symbolized than by the relation between an affectionate husband and wife. Everything is done from love and nothing from compulsion, there is perfect confidence on both sides, and both are equally indispensable to each other. It is simply the carrying out of the fundamental maxim that the universal cannot act on the plane of the particular except through the particular. Only this philosophical axiom develops into a warm living intercourse. Now this is the position of the soul which is indicated by the name Hephzibah. In common with all other words derived from the Semitic root hafs, it implies the idea of guarding, just as in the East a hasfiz is one who guards the letter of the Koran by having the whole book by heart, and in many similar expressions. Hephzibah may therefore be translated as a guarded one, thus recalling the New Testament description of those who are guarded into salvation. It is precisely this conception of being guarded by a superior power that distinguishes the worship of Ishi from that of Baali. A special relation has been established between the divine spirit and the individual soul, one of absolute confidence and personal intercourse. This does not require any departure from the general law of the universe, but is due to that specializing of the law through the presentation of special conditions personal to the individual, of which I have spoken before. But all the time there has been no change in the universal spirit, the only change has been in the mental attitude of the individual. He has come into a new thought, a clearer perception of God. He has faced the questions: what is God? Where is God? How does God work? And he has found the answer in the apostolic statement that God is over all, through all, and in all, and he realizes that God is the root of the individual's own being, ever present in him, ever working through him, and universally present around him. This realization of the true relation between the originating spirit and the individual mind is what is esoterically spoken of as the mystical marriage, in which the two have ceased to be separate and have become one. As a matter of fact they always were one, but since we can apprehend things only from the standpoint of our own consciousness, it is our recognition of the fact that makes it a practical reality for ourselves. but an intelligent recognition will never make a confusion of the two parts of which the whole consists, and will never lead the individual to suppose that he is handling a blind force or that a blind force is handling him. He will neither dethrone God, nor lose himself by absorption in deity, but he will recognize the reciprocity of the divine and the human as the natural and logical outcome of the essential conditions of the creative process. Lecture 10. The Worship of Ishi. End of Part 1 of 2. Need help understanding Troward's teachings? The Thomas Troward lectures contain very deep and powerful information, but to get the most out of them, require repeated listening and in-depth study. Troward had only one personal student, Genevieve Behrend, and her book Your Invisible Power distills the essence of Troward's lectures in a concise and easy-to-understand format. For many, this is a much preferred way to learn Troward's teachings. Click the link below this video to visit yourinvisiblepower.us and learn more about Genevieve Behrend's recently updated book.
Click the link in the description below for a chance to win 10 classic best-selling Law of Attraction books